Okay, so in this video, we're just going to continue talking about these 18th century conflicts and how this is going to set up the stage for the French Revolution. Okay, so when we last left off, nobody liked how the War of Austrian Succession played out. Nobody was happy with their allies. So they all switched partners. And this switching is known as the Diplomatic Revolution of 1756. So here's where the big switches happen. The British switch to the Prussians. So they were allies with the Austrians, and now the British switch to the Prussians. They saw the Prussians as a better check on the French. The French switched to the Austrians. Now, this is a big, big deal. And this is one of the very first inklings of what's going to happen during the French Revolution. So the French switch to the Austrians because the French are terrified of fighting the British Navy and the Prussian army. And the only other partner left for them are their hated rivals, the Austrians. The Austrians are still upset with the Prussians for stealing Silesia. And now that they've lost their partner, the British, the Austrians really have no choice but to join up with the French. So in order to cement this weird new alliance, the French heir to the throne, the future Louis XVI, is, I guess, married to the daughter of Maria Theresa, and her name is Marie Antoinette. So to cement this alliance between the French and the Austrians, Louis XVI, he's not Louis XVI yet, but he will be, marries one of the daughters of Maria Theresa, and she'll be known as Marie Antoinette. Now, this is a diplomatic alliance, but the people of France do not like her because they've been told for years and years and years that the Austrians are our enemies And now all of a sudden, our future queen is going to be one of these Austrians that we've been told to hate for years and years and years. One more to throw into this mix are the Russians, who really weren't involved too much in the War of Austrian Succession to begin with, but kind of fearing a growing Prussian power, the Russians join the French and the Austrians. And this is going to lead directly into the 7 Years' War. So 1756 to 1763. Depending on how you look at it, some historians include the North American theater in this, called the French and Indian War. Except that starts in 1754, and they include that in there. And then, again, some historians others say the First War didn't end. And so really, this is a 23-year conflict that includes the War of Austrian Succession, with just a pause in the middle for everyone to catch their breath. And so some people, some historians claim that this is just one long war with a break in the middle. So there's 3 different ways of dating this war. The 7 Years' War is this 7-year period. If you include the French and Indian War in there, which starts in 1754, it's a 9-year war. And then if you include the War of Austrian Succession in there, it starts in 1740. But the 7 Years' War starts with Prussia preemptively attacking Austria to prevent Austria from retaking Silesia. Now, again, the war itself is not really that important, but there are a couple of interesting points to bring up. The first, so the war is not important. But there are some interesting aspects that bear a little bit of discussion. So the first is that this is a truly global war. Like, this is going to happen everywhere. So this war is going to be fought in Europe, but it's also going to be fought in North America as the French and Indian War. It's also going to be fought in South America between Spanish and Portuguese colonies. And the winner here is going to be Brazil. So Brazil grows as a result of this. It's going to be fought in India as the kind of failing Mughal Empire and the French try to dislodge the British East India Company. They fail. It's fought in Africa as the British take the French colony of Senegal. And it's also fought all over the oceans, primarily between the British and the French navies, which the British decisively win. So the British decisively win these naval battles. The second important thing as a result of this war is that a lot of colonial territory is exchanged. So colonies are exchanged as a result of the war. So all French territory in India goes to the British, or really the British East India Company. All the French territory in North America is divided between the British and the Spanish, with the exception of their Caribbean islands. So the French keep their Caribbean sugar plantations, but everything else in North America is divided between the British and the Spanish. Eventually, this stuff will be given back to France during the Napoleonic Wars, but we'll worry about that when we get to Napoleon. And for a brief period, Florida becomes British, although it's going to be given back to the Spanish after the American Revolution. Thirdly, and we'll probably talk more about this when we get to the French Revolution, but this is a direct cause of the American Revolution. The French lead an anti-British alliance because the British were the big winners of the 7 Years' War. And so the French, who were the big losers, lead this anti-British alliance to knock the British down a few rungs. So they join up with a bunch of American dissidents upset about their taxes. And the reason the French do this is that the French hope to take over the lucrative American trade routes from the British. But this fails because the Americans sign a separate peace treaty with the British after the war is over. So the French spend a bunch of money helping the Americans break away from the British, and they're hoping that they will be rewarded by signing an exclusive trade route or exclusive trade treaty with the French. And then the Americans go and sign the same treaty that the French wanted, but with the British. So the French spend a bunch of money and get nothing to show for it. Which, coincidentally, makes them broke, which is another cause of the French Revolution. They hoped that they would be getting their money back with trade with the now independent United States, but they didn't get their money back. Now, while all this is going on, there's another set of wars happening in the East. And we should probably bring these up just briefly because they're also important for what's going to happen as we move into the 19th and 20th centuries. So these are a series of Russo-Turkish wars. So the first ones kind of start in the 1760s, and the first one ends in 1774, but they're going to keep going onward. So there are lots of Russo-Turkish wars. So Russia, instead of fighting the Prussians and the Austrians, decide to expand to the south at the expense of the kind of declining Ottoman Empire. Now, without getting too in-depth into what's going into the Ottoman Empire, the military in the Ottoman Empire has a lot of control over the government. And the military is highly conservative. They don't want to change things. At the same time, religious conservatives in the government are resisting progress that came from the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment. For pretty much the same reasons that the Catholic Church opposed the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment. So both of these things, kind of those two things together, kind of lead them to kind of fall behind other Europeans scientifically and technologically. Because remember, eventually European governments saw the benefit of the scientific revolution. They saw that this could help us win wars. The military in the Ottoman Empire and the religious conservatives in the Ottoman Empire saw these things as disruptive. So in the Ottoman Empire, they chose political stability over the instability that progress can cause. So they would rather not change and keep things stable rather than risk the instability that progress can cause. In any event, the Russians pretty easily defeated the Ottoman Empire and expanded south into what is now Ukraine and the Caucasus Mountains. Okay, so again, I'm going to stop here because I think this sets us up nicely for where the French Revolution is going to start. So in our next series of videos, we will dive directly into the chaos of the French Revolution. So until then, this is Mr. Nissen signing off.